She spat on him and called him worthless, just like she did on the day they lost the outpost at Krellis. He remembered that day, the smell of ozone and blood. Now standing before her pirate throne, he didn't speak. He just moved. In 33 seconds, it was over. Her arrogance shattered into something else entirely. This isn't a story of revenge. It's about the cost of choices made in the dark between stars. Their armor plates ground together, back to back in the chitinous sea of Xylos swarmers. Rorik's rifle barrel glowed orange hot. Lyra's vibroblade hummed through alien carapaces. The air thickened with the smell of ozone and acrid ichor that ate through composite plating. Command's transmission crackled through their helmet comms. A retreat order, full withdrawal to save the command center. Strategic necessity. The words felt hollow against the screams rising from the civilian sector below. Lyra's voice cut through the tactical channel, raw and immediate. We can't leave them. We hold this line. Rorik kept firing, his motions economical. Orders are clear. We fall back. His voice stayed level, the discipline hammered into him through 3 tours. The debate lasted 12 seconds. In that time, 17 more civilians died. You could chart their deaths by the fading screams on the open channel. That sound would follow them both through Jump Space Dreams and Silent Night's planetside. Studies of combat trauma show these moments forge bonds that never break. Shared horror becomes a language only 2 people speak. They received medals for holding the line as long as they did. Command called it bravery. They called it failure. Survival guilt settled into their bones like radiation. Rorik carried it as quiet responsibility. Lyra carried it as burning fuel. Their first real fracture began with that retreat order. The moment she saw discipline as betrayal and he saw rebellion as chaos. They'd descended into hell together, but they climbed out looking at different horizons. The outpost at Krellis didn't just fall. It became a crucible that reshaped souls. What emerged weren't just soldiers with medals, but 2 people permanently marked by the choices made in smoke and screaming. That day forged an unbreakable bond between them, but also the fault line that would years later shatter everything. They walked away from those ruins bound together by shared horror, already heading toward different wars. Civilian life felt like gravity turned down too low. Lyra wandered through safe zones and clean stations where nothing mattered. No adrenaline surge in the morning. No weight of a rifle in her hands. Just quiet days that stretched into quieter nights. The peace felt like suffocation. She took her first mercenary contract 6 months after discharge. Bodyguard work for a mining corporation executive. The man smelled of expensive cologne and fear. His rivals tried to poison his drink at a sector gala. Lyra intercepted it. She didn't report the attempt to authorities. The executive paid her triple to keep silent. That silence became the first crack in her foundation. The outer rim offered different rules. Lawlessness became a tool rather than a problem. She started taking contracts with blurred lines, security for shipments with no clear manifest, protection for negotiations that happened in dark corners of spaceports. Each job required a little more moral flexibility. She found she had plenty to give. Other veterans gravitated toward her. Men and women with the same hollow look in their eyes. They'd done their duty and returned to a society that had no use for their skills. They understood the language of violence better than the language of peace. Lyra became their natural leader. She spoke about Krellis in ways they understood. She gave them purpose again. Her faction grew from 5 to 20 to 50. They operated from a modified frigate hidden in an asteroid belt. Their targets were corporate shipping lanes. They'd disable security systems, board vessels, and take what they needed. They never killed crew members unless forced. Lyra insisted on that rule, a faint echo of her old ethics. Studies show many combat veterans struggle to find meaning after service. The structured violence of military life creates patterns civilian existence can't match. Some find peace. Others go looking for war in different forms. Lyra told her crew they were striking back at the system that used them, then discarded them. She said the corporations started the wars that broke them. Now they'd take payment in cargo and credits. Each successful raid hardened her a little more. The soldier who cared about collateral damage at Krellis became the pirate who calculated risks and rewards. She stopped seeing merchant crews as people. They became obstacles or assets. Her hands, once steady on a medkit, now charted attack vectors against unarmed freighters. The transformation happened gradually, like rust spreading across hull plating. She kept Rorik's old dog tags in her pocket but couldn't remember why. The weight felt familiar, a connection to something she'd left behind. She told herself she was fighting the real war now, not following orders like a good little soldier. The justification became her armor against the person she'd been. Her descent into piracy wasn't a fall but a gradual slide. Each compromise made the next one easier. The adrenaline returned. The purpose felt real. But the reflection in her cabin viewport showed a stranger wearing familiar scars. She became exactly what the system had trained her to be, a weapon without a master, seeking targets that couldn't fight back. Rorik took contracts with frontier colonies that couldn't afford corporate security. He assessed perimeter defenses, trained local militia, and patrolled settlement boundaries. The work paid barely enough for fuel and repairs. Other veterans he'd served with took lucrative mercenary work for mining corporations or private security firms. They wore custom armor and flew modified ships. Rorik wore patched fatigues and slept in his cockpit. The temptation whispered at 3 a.m. when accounts ran low. He knew 20 ways to disable a cargo ship's tracking systems. He could calculate exactly how much a pharmaceutical shipment would bring on the black market. The skills they'd trained into him at great expense were marketable commodities in the outer rim. He kept his hands clean. Colony governors started requesting him by name. He had a reputation for resolving conflicts without body counts. When raiders threatened an agricultural settlement, he didn't ambush them at the jump point. He met them at the docking bay with 2 local farmers holding mining lasers. He talked about crop yields and seasonal storms. The raiders left without firing a shot. They took a crate of fresh vegetables as tribute. Studies show combat veterans often find purpose in protective roles. The structure mirrors military service without the moral compromises. Rorik became a fixed point in unstable regions. Farmers knew his ship's silhouette against their moons. Children recognized his walk from 100 meters away. He never stayed long enough to put down roots, but he left each place more secure than he found it. He refined his combat techniques toward maximum efficiency. Every movement served multiple purposes. A deflection became a disabling strike. A step back created tactical advantage. He practiced until reactions became instinct, requiring no conscious thought. The goal was always to end confrontations quickly, before they escalated into violence. His reputation grew not for how many he'd killed, but for how few. His silence became part of his toolkit. He spoke when necessary with precision. Words became like ammunition, conserved until needed. The quiet spaces between conversations often revealed more than words could. People filled silence with their intentions. He learned to listen to what they weren't saying. The habit also kept Krellis at bay. Too many words might unleash memories better left contained. He tracked Lyra's activities through secure channels. Her raids followed predictable patterns. She targeted soft corporate targets with high-value cargo. He noted her increasing boldness, the improved equipment her crew used. He didn't interfere until she entered systems under his protection. The line between their worlds was drawing tighter with each solar cycle. The colonies became his reason to maintain discipline. He saw families trying to build something lasting on rocky worlds with thin atmospheres. They represented what they'd fought for at Krellis, ordinary people living ordinary lives without fear. Their safety became his anchor against the pull of easier choices. Every credit he earned honestly felt like a small victory against the chaos. His path diverged from Lyra's not in grand gestures, but in daily decisions. Where she saw systems to exploit, he saw communities to protect. Their shared history at Krellis became the foundation for entirely different philosophies. The same training that made her a successful pirate made him an effective guardian. The collision between them became inevitable the moment her piracy threatened the people under his care. The command deck air carried the metallic tang of recycled oxygen mixed with something else, the sharp scent of superiority that clung to power unchallenged for too long. Rorik stepped through the blast doors without drawing weapons, his hands loose at his sides. His eyes moved in continuous arcs, cataloging positions, identifying armaments, noting sightlines. 37 armed individuals occupied the space. He registered each as a potential threat vector, calculating angles of approach and cover options. Lyra's pirates formed a loose perimeter around him, weapons held at ready positions but not quite aimed. Their fingers rested alongside triggers rather than on them. They watched for her signal, a collection of hardened faces showing various stages of alertness. Some looked bored. A few showed predatory interest. One or two seemed to recognize him from older conflicts. She sat elevated on a command throne fashioned from salvaged warship plating. The chair gleamed under the harsh lighting, its surface a patchwork of different armor grades welded together. Scorch marks and impact dents decorated the armrests like medals. The construction spoke of battles won and ships destroyed. It was designed to intimidate, to establish dominance before a single word was spoken. Psychological studies note that physical displays of power affect confrontation dynamics. Elevated positions, symbols of authority, controlled environments, all serve to establish psychological advantage. Lyra had arranged her space like a theater of dominance. The lighting focused on her throne. The deck plating echoed underfoot to emphasize movement. Every element communicated that visitors entered her domain on her terms. Her eyes found his across the room. They held the same fierce intensity he remembered from Krellis, but now tempered by something harder. The focus that once coordinated medic drills now assessed threats and opportunities. The command presence that rallied defenders now projected ownership of the space and everyone in it. She showed no surprise at his appearance. No flicker of recognition beyond tactical assessment. The shared history between them might as well have been someone else's memory. The other pirates sensed the unusual quality of this intrusion. They watched their captain's face for cues, noting her unchanged posture, the lack of immediate orders. This wasn't some merchant pleading for their cargo back or a rival pirate seeking negotiation. The man standing calmly at their center carried himself with the quiet assurance of someone who'd walked into worse situations and walked back out. Rorik's demeanor created a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Where the pirates shifted weight from foot to foot, he stood balanced and still. Where their eyes darted between him and their captain, his gaze remained steady. His breathing stayed even, his posture relaxed but not careless. He looked like a man waiting for a train, rather than someone surrounded by armed opponents in a pirate stronghold. The scene established everything that needed to be said about their divergent paths. Her corrupted power, displayed in welded plating and nervous gunmen, his quiet competence demonstrated through stillness and assessment. They were about to have a conversation, but the real confrontation had already begun in the space between what she'd built and what he represented. The throne room wasn't just a location. It was a statement about everything she'd become, and everything he refused to be. Her voice cut through the recycled air, not as a greeting, but as an accusation wrapped in the faint memory of shared history. "Still standing like a good little soldier," she said from her throne. The words carried the weight of old battles, the faint echo of comms chatter during firefights. She didn't ask why he'd come or how he'd found her. She opened with the thing that had divided them first. She leaned forward, the welded metal of her throne creaking slightly. "Still serving the same system that left us to die at Krellis." Her tone mixed mockery with genuine bitterness. "They gave you a medal for following orders while civilians screamed on open channels. You still taking their credits? Still polishing your boots for inspections?" Psychological research shows verbal provocation often serves as prelude to physical confrontation. The words themselves matter less than their calculated impact. Lyra chose each one like selecting ammunition, designed to penetrate armor and find vulnerable spots. She referenced specific engagements where command decisions had cost lives. The mining colony evacuation where artillery support arrived too late. The medical station that was deemed not worth retaking. Each example selected from their shared experience, each one a small knife twist. Her eyes fixed on his face, searching for any reaction. She got none. Rorik stood as he had since entering, balanced, relaxed, observant. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any retort could have. The mockery in her voice began to sharpen into genuine anger. The performance for her crew started becoming something real, something personal. She stood from her throne, the motion fluid and controlled. Her boots echoed on the deck plating as she closed the distance between them. She stopped just inside what most would consider personal space, close enough that he could see the fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there at Krellis. The scent of weapon cleaner and expensive coffee lingered around her. The circle of pirates tightened almost imperceptibly. Weapons shifted from ready positions to aimed stances. Fingers moved closer to triggers. They watched their captain's posture, the set of her shoulders, the tension in her hands. They'd seen this pattern before, the verbal baiting, the closing distance, the sudden violence that followed. They expected this encounter to end like others had, with bodies on the deck and another story to tell in the mess hall. Lyra's face showed frustration at his continued silence. She'd expected argument, justification, maybe even shame. The absence of any reaction seemed to deny her the confrontation she'd prepared for. Her hands curled slightly at her sides, the well-maintained nails catching the light. She'd built this entire scene, the throne, the armed crew, the dramatic entrance, and he refused to play his part. The insult established everything about their current relationship. Her contempt for the discipline he maintained. Her belief that his continued adherence to military codes represented weakness rather than strength. The way she saw his silence as submission rather than strategy. She'd become so accustomed to people reacting to her provocations that she'd forgotten what real control looked like. She mistook his stillness for passivity, his silence for agreement. This opening exchange set the terms of their confrontation more clearly than any declaration could have. She believed she was the powerful one, surrounded by loyal fighters seated on a throne of conquest. She saw him as a relic of a broken system, alone and outnumbered. The reality, as it would soon become apparent, was something entirely different. Her words sought to diminish him, to frame him as lesser, but they only revealed how completely she misunderstood the man standing before her. She said the word like striking a match in a fuel-filled room. Worthless. It hung in the air between them, sharp and precise. She leaned forward, her face close to his. You're still taking orders from the same cowards who left those people to die. Following procedures while the universe burns. What's that worth, Rorik? What's your precious discipline worth when it makes you their tool? Her voice held none of the theatrical quality from earlier. This wasn't performance for her crew. The contempt felt personal, immediate. She wasn't trying to provoke a reaction anymore. She was stating what she believed to be absolute truth. Her eyes showed the same judgment he'd seen at Krellis when he'd confirmed the retreat order. That moment when she looked at him not as a comrade but as part of the machine that failed them. Combat trauma research indicates certain words trigger neural pathways associated with traumatic events. Worthless landed not as simple insult but as key turning a lock. It connected directly to survival guilt, to the feeling of failing those who depended on him. The word echoed in the space where Krellis still lived, where civilian screams still played on endless loop. It wasn't just an attack on his present choices. It was condemnation of his entire path since that day. Rorik's posture remained unchanged. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides. His facial muscles showed no tension, but his breathing shifted almost imperceptibly. The rhythm changed from calm meditation to something more controlled, more intentional. The exhale became slightly longer than the inhale. His chest rose and fell with new purpose. To anyone not trained in combat physiology, he looked exactly the same. To those who understood violence, he'd just switched modes. The pirates noticed. Their grips tightened on weapon stocks. Fingers slid onto triggers. They shifted weight from casual readiness to combat stance. They recognized the change in atmosphere like animals sense shifting barometric pressure before a storm. Their eyes moved from their captain to the silent man at their center. They understood something had changed even if they couldn't name it. Lyra missed all of it. She was too focused on her verbal assault, too convinced of her dominance. She saw only his external stillness and interpreted it as submission. She believed her words were landing, that she was breaking through his famous control. The satisfaction showed in her eyes, in the set of her jaw. She thought she was winning. The accusation cut to the core of everything he'd built since Krellis. His work protecting frontier colonies, his refusal to take easier paths, his daily choice to use his skills for protection rather than profit. She framed it all as weakness. She reduced his moral code to blind obedience. She transformed his quiet strength into servitude. This moment echoed their original fracture with perfect clarity. At Krellis, she saw his discipline as betrayal. Now she saw it as worthlessness. The same qualities she'd once relied on to cover her flank during firefights now represented everything she despised. She'd traveled so far down her own path that she could no longer recognize strength that didn't look like dominance. The word hung between them, its impact rippling outward. The pirates tightened their circle. Weapons came to full readiness. The atmosphere on the command deck shifted from tense to lethal. Lyra stood waiting for a response, for any acknowledgement that her words had hit their mark. She got only silence and that slight change in breathing pattern that she failed to recognize as the calm before execution. She moved closer, entering the space where personal distance collapses into confrontation. The air between them carried the sharp scent of stimulants on her breath, a chemical edge overlying the recycled atmosphere. Her eyes held no remnant of camaraderie, only the certainty of dominance. The pirates watched, weapons ready, anticipating the climax of this performance. Her head moved in a quick, deliberate motion. Saliva struck his cheekbone with audible impact. The moisture spread across his skin, catching the harsh lighting as it began its slow descent toward his jawline. The act carried ancient meaning, a physical violation that transcended cultures and languages. It represented the ultimate denial of dignity, the crossing of a boundary that words could not breach. Research into combat psychology shows physical insults trigger primal responses. The body prepares for violence before the conscious mind registers the insult. Adrenaline surges, muscles tense. The impulse to retaliate flashes through neural pathways honed by evolution. In trained soldiers, this response becomes a choice rather than a reflex. The discipline lies in controlling what the body wants to do automatically. The pirates expected immediate reaction. Some tightened their grips on weapons, aiming more precisely at center mass. Others shifted stance, preparing for the explosion of violence they'd seen so many times before. They knew their captain's methods, the calculated escalation from words to actions designed to break opponents before physical contact even began. They'd seen merchants weep, rival pirates beg, and corporate envoys soil themselves after such provocations. Lyra's lips curved into a smile of genuine satisfaction. She saw the spit on his face as victory, as proof she'd finally broken through his legendary control. She expected the anger, the shame, the loss of composure that would make him vulnerable. She'd used this technique before with less disciplined targets and watched them crumble. Her confidence filled the space between them, solid and unquestioned. Rorik didn't move. He didn't wipe his face. He didn't flinch or blink. The moisture continued its path down his cheek, but he gave no indication of noticing it. His breathing remained at the same controlled rhythm established moments before. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides. His eyes maintained their steady focus, not on Lyra's triumphant face, but on the space between them where action would begin. His stillness became more terrifying than any reaction could have been. Where violence would have been expected and manageable, this absolute calm created uncertainty. The pirates glanced at each other, their confidence wavering. They'd trained for combat, for shouted commands and explosive action. This silent, motionless response fell outside their experience. The deck seemed to grow quieter, the hum of systems fading into background noise. Lyra's smile faltered slightly. The absence of reaction began to register as something other than submission. She searched his face for any sign of the humiliation she'd intended to inflict. She found only calm assessment, the same expression he'd worn while calculating firing solutions at Krellis. The spit on his face became not a mark of her dominance but a testament to his control. The moment stretched, each second amplifying the tension in the room. The physical insult had crossed the line from verbal provocation to actionable offense. It represented the final break from any pretense of shared history or mutual respect. It was the trigger that made response inevitable. But the nature of that response, its timing and form, remained entirely in Rorik's control. The spit on his face wasn't the end of the confrontation. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Time compressed between one heartbeat and the next. Rorik's mind processed the room in 3 dimensions, mapping vectors and probabilities. 37 armed individuals formed an incomplete circle around him. Lyra stood within arm's reach, her expression still locked in triumphant contempt. Each pirate represented a separate calculation. Weapon type, stance, reaction time, line of fire. Special operations training enables simultaneous threat processing under extreme stress. His assessment included environmental factors. The deck plating offered minimal traction, but good acoustic damping. The overhead lighting created sharp shadows that could conceal movement. The command consoles provided partial cover, but also created fragmentation hazards if struck by weapons fire. The air circulation system hummed at a frequency that could mask subtle sounds. He calculated Lyra's position relative to her throne. The welded metal construction would deflect light energy weapons, but offered no protection against projectiles. Her current stance left her balanced but unprepared for close engagement. She expected verbal retaliation or submission, not physical response. Her weight distribution favored her right side, suggesting a concealed weapon on her left hip. The pirate formation showed weaknesses. 3 individuals on the northern arc stood too close together, their fields of fire overlapping. 2 others near engineering consoles appeared distracted, their attention divided between the confrontation and console readouts. The youngest pirate, positioned near life support, held his weapon with nervous uncertainty, a potential hesitation point. His training emphasized economy of motion and maximum effect. Every action must serve multiple purposes. A deflection should also position for the next strike. A step should create advantage while denying opponent options. The goal was resolution with minimal energy expenditure, like solving a mathematical equation with elegant efficiency. He decided on a sequence focused solely on Lyra. Engaging the other pirates would be inefficient and risk unnecessary casualties. The plan required neutralizing her command authority through demonstration rather than elimination. The takedown must be precise, controlled, and psychologically definitive. It must communicate superior capability without crossing into brutality. The calculation accounted for reaction times. Pirate responses would lag by 0.3 seconds after initial movement. Lyra's reaction would be faster, perhaps 0.2 seconds, but compromised by overconfidence. His own trained response time measured 0.1 seconds under combat conditions. This differential created windows of opportunity within the engagement timeline. He identified key pressure points on Lyra's body that would achieve temporary incapacitation without permanent injury. Nerve clusters near the collarbone and shoulder could disable arm movement. Specific strikes to leg muscles would disrupt balance. Controlled pressure to carotid arteries would cause brief unconsciousness if required. Each option represented a tool selected for specific effect. The entire assessment completed in 0.8 seconds, less than a single human breath. The mental process felt neither rushed nor deliberate. It simply occurred as his training intended, a seamless flow from perception to plan. The spit still moist on his cheek became one more data point in the calculation, confirming Lyra's current emotional state and predictability. This combat assessment reflected years of outer rim experience, refined through constant practice. It leveraged understanding of pirate psychology, combat physics, and human physiology. The plan prioritized efficiency over spectacle, control over violence, resolution over domination. It represented the culmination of his chosen path, using hard-won skills for precise application rather than indiscriminate force. The calculation complete, his body prepared for execution. Muscles tensed in specific sequences, breathing patterns optimized oxygen flow, sensory focus narrowed to key inputs. The transition from assessment to action became seamless, a shift from potential to kinetic that would leave no room for second thoughts or hesitation. Rorik's weight shifted almost imperceptibly to his left foot, a movement so slight it barely disturbed the air. His shoulders relaxed into the motion, not a sag of defeat but a subtle rebalancing of tension. To the pirates it looked like retreat. They'd seen men shrink under Lyra's provocations before, their bodies folding inward as spirit drained away. This small retreat signaled submission, the breaking point they'd been waiting for. Their grips on weapons loosened slightly. Alertness gave way to expectation. They'd seen this story play out before. The verbal assault, the physical insult, the final collapse of resistance. Lyra's smile widened, genuine satisfaction smoothing the tension from her face. She saw the shift as confirmation of her dominance, the moment his famous discipline finally cracked under pressure. Her chin lifted in triumph. She'd reduced the legendary soldier to a man stepping back from confrontation. The spit on his cheek glistened as testament to her victory. She didn't see the calculation behind his movement, the strategic positioning of his weight. She saw only what she wanted to see, another opponent broken by her will. Research into combat dynamics shows minimal movement often precedes explosive action. The most effective strikes begin with economy, not telegraphing. A boxer's knockout punch starts with a barely noticeable shift in stance. A martial artist's throw begins with subtle weight redistribution. These movements mask intention, hiding violence behind apparent passivity. The body prepares for action by appearing to relax, conserving energy for the burst to come. Rorik's hands remained at his sides, fingers loose and relaxed. No fists clenched. No muscles tensed in preparation for attack. His breathing pattern continued its controlled rhythm, the exhale slightly longer than the inhale. His eyes maintained their steady focus, not on Lyra's triumphant face, but on the space between them where action would unfold. The spit still traced a damp line down his cheek, but he gave no indication of noticing its presence. He released a slow breath, allowing tension to drain from his shoulders. The motion appeared to be surrender, a physical acknowledgement of defeat. His posture softened without collapsing, maintaining structural integrity while suggesting submission. Every aspect of his presentation communicated acquiescence, from the relaxed hands to the slightly lowered head. He became the picture of a man who had accepted his position. The pirates responded to these cues with decreased readiness. Weapons lowered from aimed positions to ready stances. Fingers moved away from triggers. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes lost their combat focus. They'd seen the confrontation reach its inevitable conclusion. Their captain had broken another opponent through sheer force of will. The tension that had filled the command deck began to dissipate, replaced by the satisfaction of witnessed dominance. They anticipated the next phase, the mocking remarks, the dismissal, perhaps some physical demonstration of superiority. This relaxation created the exact opening Rorik needed. Their decreased alertness expanded his window of opportunity. The slight delay in their reaction times increased from 0.3 seconds to perhaps 0.5. Their focus shifted from combat readiness to observational mode. They became spectators rather than participants, expecting drama rather than violence. The subtle shift in their attention created vulnerabilities throughout the formation. The minimal movement achieved everything required. It lowered opponent readiness without alerting them to the coming action. It created tactical advantage through misdirection rather than force. It demonstrated the principle that sometimes the most powerful actions begin with the smallest motions. The stage was set not for the confrontation they expected, but for the one he had planned. The economy of motion had done its work, and now the real action could begin. His left hand moved first, deflecting her reaching arm with minimal force. The motion wasn't a block but a redirection, using her own momentum against her. His right hand struck her throat with precise placement, the edge of his hand making contact just below the larynx. The impact wasn't lethal force but calculated pressure, enough to disrupt breathing and prevent vocalization without causing permanent damage. The strike followed principles of combat efficiency, maximum effect with minimum energy expenditure. He rotated his body clockwise, his right foot pivoting on the deck plating. The rotation used her forward momentum to continue her movement beyond her control. His left hand maintained contact with her arm, guiding rather than forcing. The motion became a continuous flow of energy transfer, rather than separate actions. His right foot swept her legs from beneath her, the contact point just above her ankles where balance is most vulnerable. She hit the deck plating before her nervous system registered the sequence of events. The impact echoed through the command deck, a solid sound of body meeting metal. Her breath came in ragged, unsuccessful attempts as her diaphragm struggled against the throat strike's effect. Her eyes showed confusion first, then dawning recognition of what had happened. The transition from standing to fallen occurred faster than conscious thought could process. The pirates hesitated, weapons half raised. Their training hadn't prepared them for this scenario. Firing risked hitting their captain, who now lay at the man's feet. Their reaction times, already slowed by earlier decreased alertness, now faced additional complications. They looked to each other for cues, for someone to make the decision about engagement. The unified perimeter fractured into individual uncertainties. Rorik used their hesitation as part of his tactical calculation. The delay gave him additional seconds to consolidate control of the situation. He maintained his position relative to Lyra's body, using her as partial cover against potential fire from certain angles. His breathing remained steady, his focus entirely on the immediate physical reality rather than the surrounding threats. He operated within the window of opportunity created by their confusion. The takedown demonstrated advanced understanding of combat physics. Every action served multiple purposes. The deflection also positioned for the next movement. The strike also created distance. The rotation also maintained balance. The techniques reflected years of training in systems that prioritize efficiency over spectacle. The goal wasn't to dominate through strength but to control through precision. Lyra's body attempted to respond but found no coordination. The throat strike disrupted neural signals along the vagus nerve, causing temporary disorientation. Her limbs moved without purpose, her training overcome by physiological response. The solid impact with the deck plating added impact trauma to the neurological disruption. She became a prisoner of her own body's reactions, aware but unable to coordinate effective response. The pirate's indecision became a tangible element in the room. Those with clear shots hesitated to take them. Those without clear shots hesitated to reposition. The chain of command had been physically interrupted, leaving no clear authority to give orders. They'd trained to respond to shouted commands and obvious threats, not to this quiet, precise violence that left their leader disabled but alive. Rorik's movements throughout the sequence remained economical and purposeful. No energy wasted on unnecessary motion, no theatrical flourishes or excessive force. The takedown achieved its objective with mechanical precision, like solving an equation with perfect variables. It communicated not anger or dominance but pure capability, the application of skill without emotional investment. The initial engagement established control of the confrontation's dynamics. By disabling Lyra without killing her, Rorik created a complex problem for the pirates. By doing so with such efficiency, he demonstrated superiority that went beyond simple combat skill. The message was clear. He could have chosen lethal force but selected precise control instead. The takedown wasn't just physical action but psychological communication. As Lyra's body met the deck plating, Rorik's left hand continued its motion in a seamless transition from deflection to acquisition. His fingers found the pistol at her hip, releasing the retention catch with practiced precision. The weapon came free as she fell, its weight familiar in his palm. Military training emphasizes weapon adaptation, the ability to utilize enemy arms when yours are compromised or unavailable. This skill becomes second nature through repetition, turning unfamiliar firearms into extensions of will within seconds. The pistol hummed with contained energy, already charged and ready. A biometric lock glowed red along the grip, keyed to Lyra's genetic signature. Such security systems represent technological arrogance, the belief that complexity equals safety. In combat environments, all systems reveal vulnerabilities. Rorik applied pressure to a specific point near the weapon's power cell housing. The technique bypassed the lock through hardware manipulation rather than software override. The red light flickered to green. The hum deepened as full functionality engaged. He continued moving while the weapon came online, his body maintaining fluid motion. His right foot positioned itself near Lyra's shoulder, creating a stable firing platform. He used her fallen form as partial cover against the surrounding pirates. Their uncertain positioning created angles where her body provided protection without requiring excessive movement. The calculation occurred instinctively, part of the continuous assessment that defined combat efficiency. The pistol felt familiar in his hand. Same weight, same balance, same model they'd carried at Krellis. The texture of the grip brought memory flashes. Mud caked on polymer surfaces, the smell of ozone from overheating barrels, the weight of it on his hip during long patrols. This particular weapon had been her sidearm then, just as it was now. The continuity felt significant, a thread connecting who they'd been to who they'd become. He fired 3 rounds without bringing the weapon to eye level. The shots came in rapid succession, each discharge a controlled burst of energy. The first round struck the lighting control panel across the command deck. Sparks erupted as the main illumination failed, plunging the space into emergency red lighting. The second round hit a pirate's weapon arm, the impact causing involuntary muscle contraction that forced drop of the rifle. The third round struck the environmental control console, releasing a plume of vapor that obscured vision in the northern sector. The entire sequence from weapon acquisition to third shot took less than 2 seconds. Each action flowed into the next without hesitation or correction. The familiarity with the weapon model allowed maximum efficiency, no adjustment period required, no unfamiliar controls to navigate. His hands remembered the weight distribution, the trigger pull resistance, the sight picture alignment even without using sights. Acquiring Lyra's own weapon carried symbolic weight beyond tactical advantage. She had armed herself against everything they once stood for, turning tools of protection into instruments of predation. By taking that same weapon and using it with restraint and precision, he demonstrated the difference between their paths. The pistol represented her choices, but in his hands it served different purposes, disabling rather than killing, creating opportunities rather than eliminating threats. The weapon hummed in his hand, its energy field stable and ready. He maintained grip without excessive tension, fingers positioned for immediate response but not hovering near trigger. His stance allowed quick adjustment to any new threat vectors. The red emergency lights cast long shadows across the deck, changing the visual dynamics of the space. The vapor cloud from the damaged console continued expanding, creating additional concealment. His acquisition of her weapon completed the reversal of their positions. She lay on the deck while he stood armed with the symbol of her power. The pirates hesitated further, their confidence shaken by the rapid change in circumstances. They'd seen their captain disabled and her weapon turned against them within moments. The psychological impact registered on their faces, uncertainty replacing aggression, confusion overriding training. The familiar weight of the pistol felt like holding a piece of their shared history. He remembered cleaning these weapons together after missions, the routine maintenance that became meditation. She'd always taken extra care with hers, polishing the barrel until it shone. Now that same weapon had become part of her pirate identity, and he'd taken it back without firing a single lethal shot. The symbolism wasn't lost on him, even in the midst of combat calculations. The pirates became geometric problems to solve, not men to fight. Their positions created vectors of threat that demanded immediate attention. 3 individuals presented clear dangers based on angle and readiness. The one near the communications console had a clear line of fire and steady hands. Another by the engineering station held a shotgun-style weapon effective at close range. The third stood near life support with nervous energy that made him unpredictable. They were beginning to overcome their initial hesitation. Weapons rose to firing positions. Fingers found triggers. Eyes focused through sights. The shock of seeing their captain disabled was wearing off, replaced by training and instinct. The window of opportunity created by their confusion was closing rapidly. Decisions needed to be made about engagement. Trained soldiers prioritize threats by immediacy rather than emotion. The most dangerous opponent gets addressed first, regardless of personal feelings or dramatic potential. This Lung Jing assessment separates professional combat from brawling. It's about solving the equation of survival with maximum efficiency. Rorik's first shot from Lyra's pistol struck the lighting control panel across the command deck. Sparks erupted in a brief cascade. The main illumination failed completely. Emergency red lights activated automatically, casting the space in crimson shadows. The sudden change in lighting disrupted visual acquisition and depth perception. Pirates squinted, their eyes struggling to adjust to the new conditions. His second shot targeted the pirate near communications. The round struck the man's weapon arm just above the elbow. The impact caused immediate neuromuscular disruption. The rifle clattered to the deck plating. The man grabbed his arm, more surprised than injured. The shot was precise, enough to disable without causing permanent damage. It demonstrated perfect understanding of anatomical vulnerability. The third shot hit an environmental control console near engineering. The impact ruptured a coolant line. White vapor erupted from the breach, spreading rapidly across that sector of the deck. The steam provided visual concealment and added another element of confusion. Pirates in that area backed away from the hissing cloud, their attention divided between the threat and the environmental hazard. He never stopped moving during these actions. His feet maintained constant subtle adjustment. He shifted position relative to available cover, never presenting a stationary target. His body remained in motion even while aiming and firing. This constant movement made targeting difficult for the surrounding pirates. They faced a shifting, unpredictable opponent in uncertain conditions. The confusion among the pirate crew worked to his advantage. Their coordination fractured under the combination of factors. The changed lighting conditions affected aim. The steam cloud limited visibility in one sector. The disabled pirate created a distraction. Their command structure was compromised with Lyra on the deck. They became individuals reacting rather than a unit responding. This neutralization of peripheral threats demonstrated advanced combat management. While maintaining primary focus on Lyra, he addressed secondary dangers with economy and precision. Each action served to control the engagement space rather than eliminate opponents. The priority was managing the situation, not winning a firefight. This approach reflected deep understanding of confrontation dynamics. The red emergency lights created pools of shadow and illumination that changed the tactical landscape. Pirates stood half visible in the crimson glow, their movements exaggerated by the uncertain lighting. The steam continued spreading, adding layers of concealment. The disabled pirate remained kneeling, holding his arm. The other pirates hesitated, their confidence shaken by the rapid turn of events. This controlled management of multiple combatants showed the difference between raw aggression and trained response. Where pirates relied on numbers and firepower, Rorik used environment and psychology. Where they expected straightforward violence, he delivered calculated control. The demonstration was as much about capability as it was about restraint. Lyra pushed herself up from the deck, her movements uncoordinated but driven by pure reflex. The arrogance that had filled her moments before vanished, replaced by the raw instinct of a cornered animal. Her right hand scrambled toward her boot, fingers searching for the familiar shape of a concealed blade. The weapon lay hidden in a custom sheath, its edge honed to surgical sharpness. She'd carried it since their military days, a last resort tool she'd never needed until now. The throat strike had disrupted her nervous system's normal function. Her motions came in jerky, imprecise bursts. Depth perception wavered. Muscle coordination faltered. The adrenaline flooding her system enhanced certain responses while degrading others. Strength increased, but fine motor control suffered. Her fingers fumbled against the boot leather, struggling to find purchase on the hidden weapon's handle. Rorik's foot came down on her wrist with exact pressure. The placement was precise, pinning her arm to the deck without causing bone damage. The weight distribution prevented movement while minimizing actual force. He dropped to one knee beside her, maintaining control of both her arm and the pistol. His movements remained economical, each action serving multiple purposes. The knee drop created stability while lowering his profile. His face showed no expression, no anger at her insults, no satisfaction at her position. The features remained neutral, focused entirely on the physical reality of control. The spit still marked his cheek, but he gave it no attention. His breathing pattern stayed consistent with combat efficiency. Eyes watched her movements without emotional investment, assessing rather than judging. She struggled against the immobilization, testing the pressure with increasing force. Her free hand clawed at his leg, fingernails scraping against combat fatigues. Her legs kicked against the deck plating, seeking leverage that didn't exist. The struggle revealed trained responses fighting against physiological limitations. She found no weakness in his control. The pressure on her wrist remained constant, unyielding but not crushing. He applied focused pressure to a nerve cluster near her collarbone. The technique used precise finger placement rather than brute force. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Her muscles relaxed involuntarily, the fight draining from her body. The nervous system response overrode conscious control. Her hand went slack on the boot knife. Her breathing changed from struggle to surrender. This physical control demonstrated advanced combat training beyond simple strength. The techniques reflected deep understanding of human anatomy and nervous system responses. Every action showed calculation rather than aggression. The goal was compliance through physiological response, not domination through pain. The precision spoke of someone who understood exactly how much pressure was needed and where to apply it. The surrounding pirates watched in silence, their weapons half lowered. They saw not a brutal beating, but a clinical demonstration of superiority. Their captain lay completely immobilized by a man who showed no strain or effort. The contrast between her violent struggle and his calm control made the message clear. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about demonstrating difference in capability. The nerve pressure technique caused no permanent damage but created temporary incapacitation. It represented the culmination of his path, using violence as precise tool rather than emotional outlet. Where she had relied on aggression and intimidation, he used knowledge and control. The difference between their approaches became physically manifest in that moment of absolute immobilization. Her power had been built on shows of force. His authority came from unquestionable capability. Time resumed its normal flow as the situation stabilized. The frantic energy of combat dissipated, leaving only the aftermath of calculated action. Rorik maintained his position, Lyra immobilized beneath him with her own pistol pressed against her temple. The cold metal made contact with her skin, a final punctuation to the engagement. His finger rested alongside the trigger, not on it. The distinction mattered. This was control, not threat. The remaining pirates held their fire, weapons aimed but uncertain. Without orders from their captain, without clear signals, they hesitated. Their training hadn't covered this scenario. A leader completely neutralized, an opponent demonstrating absolute superiority without killing. They watched, waiting for someone to make a decision that never came. The chain of command had been physically interrupted, leaving them without direction. Studies of combat dynamics show most physical confrontations resolve within 30 seconds. The initial explosive action either achieves its objective or fails. This engagement fell within established parameters despite its unusual nature. The time from first movement to current stabilization measured exactly 33 seconds by the command deck's chronometer. Each second had been utilized with maximum efficiency. Lyra's eyes shifted from confusion to dawning understanding. The adrenaline fog cleared, replaced by cold realization. She recognized the precision of what had occurred. The throat strike had been calculated to disable, not kill. The weapon acquisition demonstrated skill beyond simple combat. The peripheral shots showed restraint, disabling, distracting, but not destroying. Every action communicated controlled capability rather than uncontrolled violence. She realized he could have killed her at multiple points. When she spat on him, when she called him worthless, when she reached for her blade. Each moment presented opportunities for lethal response that he ignored. The pistol at her temple represented the ultimate demonstration. He held her life in his hands but chose not to take it. The message was clearer than any verbal declaration could ever be. His restraint communicated more than violence ever could. Where she had used aggression and intimidation, he used precision and control. Where she sought to dominate through force, he demonstrated superiority through capability. The difference between their approaches became starkly apparent in that moment of absolute vulnerability. Her power had been built on fear. His authority came from undeniable competence. The red emergency lights cast everything in blood-toned shadows. The crimson glow softened edges, creating a surreal atmosphere on the command deck. Pirates stood half-visible in the dim lighting, their weapons creating sharp angles against the gloom. Steam from the damaged console continued to spread, adding to the otherworldly quality of the scene. The normal hum of ship systems sounded distant, muffled by the ongoing tension. 33 seconds had passed since his first subtle weight shift. The time frame felt both impossibly short and remarkably long. In less time than it took most people to decide what to eat for breakfast, he had disabled a pirate captain, neutralized her crew, and taken control of the situation. The precision of the engagement spoke of training honed beyond normal military standards. The exact time frame demonstrated Rorik's calculated efficiency. Every movement had served multiple purposes. Every action had been part of a larger calculation. The engagement hadn't been about winning a fight, but about demonstrating a point. The difference between their paths, their choices, their very understandings of power and responsibility. The 33 seconds became a perfect illustration of capability, exercised with intention and restraint. His complete control of the engagement extended beyond the physical actions. The psychological impact on the pirates, the demonstration to Lyra, the reassertion of his moral code, all achieved through precise application of skill rather than brute force. The time frame wasn't just a measure of speed but of efficiency, of nothing wasted, of perfect execution. It stood as silent testament to the man he'd chosen to become after Krellis, and the path he'd refused to take. The command deck held only Lyra's ragged breathing and the distant console alarms. The sharp scent of ozone mixed with the metallic tang of spilled coolant. Rorik maintained pressure on her wrist, his grip firm but not crushing. He didn't speak. He made no demands. The pistol remained steady against her temple, its presence more statement than threat. His silence became a weight in the space between them. Where moments before there had been insults and confrontation, now there was only quiet. This absence of words forced Lyra to confront what had just occurred. The 33 seconds of precise violence replayed in her mind with shocking clarity. Each movement, each decision, each controlled action revealed itself in the stillness that followed. Psychological studies note that silence after violence carries particular power. It creates space for realization that words might obscure. The absence of gloating or explanation allows the defeated to process events without external narrative. The quiet becomes a mirror reflecting the reality of what transpired. She understood the demonstration completely now. He had shown total superiority without taking a single life. Her pirates stood unused, their weapons half lowered. Her command throne sat empty. Her own pistol rested against her head. Every element of her power had been systematically neutralized while maintaining absolute restraint. The message was unmistakable. Her arrogance shattered against this reality. The confidence that had filled her moments before drained away, leaving only cold understanding. She had believed herself powerful because she commanded violence. He had demonstrated that true power meant controlling violence. The difference between their philosophies became starkly apparent in that silent moment. The pirates slowly lowered their weapons. Some placed them on deck plating. Others let them hang from slack hands. They recognized the fight had concluded, not through surrender or negotiation, but through undeniable demonstration. Their eyes showed confusion shifting to reluctant acceptance. They had witnessed something outside their experience, combat that sought resolution rather than domination. Rorik's eyes held no triumph. They showed only steady assessment and something else, a quiet sadness at the necessity of this confrontation. The expression communicated that this hadn't been personal victory but unfortunate duty. There was no pleasure in demonstrating her failure, only recognition that it had been required. He slowly released pressure on her wrist. The movement was deliberate, controlled. He stood smoothly, keeping the pistol but breaking contact. His boots made soft sounds on the deck plating. He didn't look at the surrounding pirates. His attention remained focused on the space immediately around him, maintaining awareness without aggressive posture. The continued silence emphasized that actions defined his character more than words ever could. He hadn't needed to explain his motives or justify his methods. The precision of his movements, the restraint of his responses, the control of the situation, all spoke more clearly than any speech. He had shown who he was through what he did, not what he said. The spit still marked his cheek, but he made no move to wipe it away. The physical insult had been answered not with retaliation but with demonstration. Its presence became part of the statement, proof that he operated beyond petty responses, that his discipline served larger purposes than personal pride. Lyra remained on the deck, not from physical incapacity but from psychological impact. The realization of what had occurred settled into her bones. She had been defeated not by superior firepower or greater aggression, but by superior skill exercised with absolute control. The silence allowed this understanding to penetrate where words might have sparked renewed defiance. The red emergency lights continued their slow pulse across the command deck. The steam from the damaged console spread thin tendrils through the air. Pirates stood motionless, waiting for someone to give direction. The scene held like a paused transmission. Frozen in the moment between violence and resolution, the quiet stretched, becoming its own form of communication, one that spoke of consequences and choices and the cost of paths taken. She lay on the deck plating, her body unharmed but her spirit fractured. The cold metal against her skin felt like judgment. In Rorik's eyes she saw no hatred, no vengeance, only clear reflection. She saw herself as he saw her, not the pirate queen on her welded throne, but the soldier who'd lost her way. The realization arrived not as sudden epiphany but as cold, spreading certainty. Her empire crumbled around her without a single shot fired at its structure. The pirates stood watching, their loyalty shifting from fear to uncertainty. Her authority hadn't been broken by force but dismantled by truth. The foundation of intimidation and aggression revealed itself as hollow against genuine capability. What remained was the empty space where her power had been. Research indicates that confronting consequences often drives change more effectively than punishment. The physical defeat meant less than the psychological reckoning. She remembered Krellis with sudden clarity, the idealistic soldiers they'd been, the determination to make difference, the shared belief that their skills would protect rather than prey upon. The memory felt like looking through someone else's eyes at a different life. Her path of piracy emerged as betrayal of everything they'd stood for. The raids on shipping lanes, the intimidation of colonies, the gradual hardening of her heart. Each choice had taken her further from the person she'd been. The justification about corrupt corporations rang hollow now. She'd become what they'd fought against at Krellis, a predator using strength against the vulnerable. Rorik's precision strike had been surgical against her ideology. He hadn't attacked her forces or her ship. He'd demonstrated the flaw in her entire philosophy. Where she used violence to dominate, he used skill to protect. Where she sought power, he exercised restraint. The difference between their approaches became undeniable in the quiet aftermath. Her way led to this moment of humiliating realization. His led to walking away unchanged. He turned without speaking, his boots making soft sounds on the deck. He didn't look back at her or the pirates. His posture showed no tension, no concern about attack. The pistol he'd taken from her remained in his hand but pointed at the floor. His movements were economical and purposeful, the same as when he'd entered. No one attempted to stop him. The pirates watched him pass through their formation, their weapons hanging useless at their sides. Their eyes showed understanding that this wasn't their fight anymore. The demonstration had been sufficient. They'd witnessed absolute superiority exercised with restraint. Their loyalty to Lyra had been based on her invincibility. That illusion had been dismantled in 33 seconds. Her true defeat wasn't the physical immobilization or the lost pistol. It was the dawning comprehension of what she'd become. The cost of her choices presented itself with brutal clarity. She'd traded shared purpose for solitary power. She'd abandoned protection for predation. The weight of this understanding pressed harder than any physical force. The red emergency lights continued their slow pulse across the command deck. Steam from the damaged console spread thin tendrils through the air. Pirates began moving slowly, uncertain of their roles. Some attended to the injured man. Others checked console readings. They avoided looking at Lyra where she remained on the deck. She pushed herself up slowly, her body responding despite her mind's numbness. Her hand went to her hip where her pistol should have been. The empty holster felt like perfect metaphor. She'd armed herself against imagined enemies and become the thing she should have fought against. The realization settled into her bones, colder than any deck plating. The command deck maintained its unnatural stillness. The air still carried the ozone scent from damaged systems. Two pirates approached Lyra cautiously. Their hands helped her to her feet, but the movement lacked its usual deference. Their grip was functional rather than respectful. Their eyes avoided hers, focusing instead on the deck plating or distant consoles. The way they touched her communicated everything about the changed dynamic. They had witnessed combat superiority without accompanying brutality. The precision of Rorik's actions left lasting impressions. He had disabled their captain without permanent injury. He had neutralized threats without taking lives. He had demonstrated capability that went beyond simple violence. This contrast with Lyra's methods created silent questions among the crew. Group dynamics shift fundamentally after leadership failure becomes visible. The pirates had built their loyalty on Lyra's perceived invincibility. They followed her because she projected strength and certainty. Seeing her completely dominated by one man shattered that foundation. Their allegiance had been based on fear and the assumption of her superiority. That assumption no longer held. Lyra didn't resume her throne. She stood where Rorik had immobilized her, her boots planted on the same deck plating. Her eyes tracked the path he'd taken through her crew. The space where he'd stood seemed to hold more presence than her welded command chair. Her hand absently touched her throat where the precise strike had landed. She dismissed the pirates with a vague gesture. The motion lacked its former authority. Her arm moved without conviction, the sweep of her hand uncertain. The command came out as whisper rather than declaration. She didn't meet their eyes as they began dispersing. The usual post-confrontation energy was absent. No boasting, no reassurances, no promises of retaliation. Some pirates exchanged glances as they moved toward exits. Their expressions showed unspoken questions about continued loyalty. Their postures communicated uncertainty rather than renewed dedication. They moved like people reconsidering commitments made under different understandings. The group cohesion that had defined them began showing hairline fractures. The demonstration had undermined her credibility as invincible leader. Her authority had been built on the premise that she couldn't be beaten. That premise evaporated in 33 seconds of precise action. The pirates now knew she could be dominated completely by someone with greater skill. This knowledge changed how they viewed her, how they followed her, why they remained. Rorik's precision had consequences beyond the immediate confrontation. The pirates would talk about what they'd witnessed. The story would spread through outer rim networks. Other factions would hear about the man who walked into a pirate stronghold and disabled its captain without killing anyone. The legend would grow with each retelling, altering perceptions of power in the region. The command deck began emptying slowly. Pirates retrieved dropped weapons with subdued movements. They checked damaged consoles with professional detachment. Their efficiency remained, but the aggressive confidence had diminished. They worked like employees completing tasks rather than loyal followers serving their queen. Lyra remained standing where she'd been defeated. Her eyes finally lifted to survey her domain. The welded throne, the armed crew, the tactical displays, all seemed like props in a performance that had concluded. The reality of her situation settled with cold clarity. She ruled only as long as others believed in her power. That belief had been fundamentally shaken. The demonstration's impact would ripple through her organization for months. Loyalty based on fear requires constant reinforcement. Once doubt enters the equation, authority becomes fragile. Her pirates would continue following orders, but the quality of their obedience would change. They would measure risks differently, consider alternatives they hadn't previously entertained. Witnessing Rorik's efficiency created comparative understanding among the crew. They had seen what true capability looked like, restrained, precise, controlled. This became the new standard against which they measured leadership. Lyra's method suddenly seemed crude by comparison. Her aggression appeared wasteful next to such economy of action. The altered dynamics would affect everything from raid planning to internal discipline. Decisions would be questioned where they hadn't been before. Suggestions would be offered with less deference. The chain of command would develop subtle resistances. These changes wouldn't happen immediately, but would emerge gradually as the memory of those 33 seconds worked through the crew's collective consciousness. He could have ended her life at multiple points. The moment she spat on him, when she reached for her blade, when she lay immobilized on the deck. Each opportunity presented itself with clear justification. He chose restraint every time. His purpose wasn't elimination, but demonstration. He needed to show the failure of her path, not become another casualty of it. Killing her would have made him just another violent actor in the rim. The outer rim already had enough corpses and not enough solutions. Another death would simply create power vacuum, another cycle of retaliation. His mission involved protecting colonies, not adding to the chaos. He understood that true strength often shows itself through restraint rather than force. Military studies confirm that exercising control requires more discipline than unleashing violence. The impulse to retaliate runs deep in trained soldiers. Overcoming that instinct demands constant vigilance. Rorik's precision takedown protected the colonies she'd been threatening, without creating new enemies. He solved the immediate problem while avoiding long-term consequences. His actions demonstrated that discipline could overcome brutality. Where she relied on aggression and intimidation, he used skill and control. The contrast became undeniable during those 33 seconds. Her methods appeared wasteful next to his economy of motion. Her power based on fear seemed fragile compared to his authority based on capability. His silence throughout the confrontation emphasized that some truths don't require explanation. The precision of his movements communicated everything necessary. The restraint he showed spoke louder than any declaration could. He let the demonstration stand on its own, allowing observers to draw their own conclusions about power and its uses. The engagement would become legend across the outer rim. Stories would spread about the man who walked into a pirate stronghold and disabled its captain without taking a life. The tale would grow with each telling, but the core truth would remain. People would remember that someone had shown another way to handle conflict. The incident served as warning to other pirates considering targeting his colonies. They would weigh the risks differently now. The calculation would include not just potential losses, but the possibility of facing similar demonstration. The legend created deterrence that went beyond simple threat of force. Rorik's choice revealed his true character and moral code. He had selected the harder path because it aligned with his values. The easy option would have been lethal force. The difficult choice involved precision, control, and restraint. His decision defined him as protector rather than destroyer. The demonstration achieved multiple objectives simultaneously. It neutralized the immediate threat to the colonies. It provided clear warning to other potential aggressors. It showed Lyra the failure of her chosen path. Most importantly, it maintained his moral integrity throughout the process. His actions reflected deep understanding of combat's purpose. Violence shouldn't be first resort but last option. When required, it should be applied with precision and restraint. The goal should always be resolution rather than domination. These principles guided every movement during the engagement. The 33-second confrontation would influence pirate behavior for years. Groups would think twice before entering systems under his protection. Some might even reconsider their career choices after hearing the story. The demonstration's impact extended far beyond that single command deck. Rorik walked away unchanged by the violence. He hadn't compromised his values to achieve his objectives. He'd demonstrated that protection didn't require becoming what you fought against. His moral code remained intact, tested under pressure, and found sufficient. The colonies could sleep safer knowing their protector understood the difference between power and responsibility. Rorik walked from the command deck without looking back. The hatch sealed behind him with a solid thump. Some victories don't require death to be decisive. He'd shattered Lyra's illusion of power without firing a single lethal shot. The Outer Rim would remember this confrontation. They'd speak in hushed tones about the soldier who mistook silence for weakness and precision for passivity. Real strength doesn't need to announce itself. Sometimes the most powerful messages are delivered without a word, written not in blood but in broken arrogance and the quiet footsteps of a man walking away.